Guys, the Gospel of Judas is not here. It's not in the Bible. It's not. So where is it? It's a text that appeared in the 2nd century around the year 180. We imagine the Gospel of Judas. Saint Irenaeus, Bishop Irenaeus of Lyon, included these Gospels among the forbidden books. He said it was not possible to accept what was in that book because it was not in accordance with orthodoxy. But we know, folks, that was a very difficult time. Christianity was receiving a lot of different conflicting information. There's always some trickery. There are always people who say things that aren't true. Irenaeus was trying to oppose all that and find the truth within it. And over time, they limited the canonical texts to 27, but a lot was lost. The apocryphal Gospels are important. There are some beautiful Gospels and a lot about the role of Mary Magdalene, for example. And there's the Gospel of Judas, which was rediscovered in 1970 and finally published in 2006 with great academic interest and research that continues to this day. It is not attributed to Judas. That's important. I brought this book, but there's a Portuguese version if you want to read it. It's the Nag Hammadi Scriptures. But there are other books there. Maybe you can find a short version, and this book is available in Portuguese. But I'll tell you what's most important here, so don't worry about it. What we know is that it's a Gnostic text, so it was written by a Gnostic Christian. Gnosis means knowledge. They considered themselves the ones who had knowledge about the truth of Jesus, the truth about Jesus. It's a branch of early Christianity from the first centuries, from the very beginning, right after the crucifixion, with theological ideas that differ from what became orthodoxy, that is, the Christian truth. And it brings a mystical view of Jesus and everything that happened around him. We're not going to go deep into Gnosis now, or the Gnostics. That's for another class, for another moment. But you need to know this to understand that we're dealing with a non-canonical, unofficial text. And I would also say that it's not possible to have everything proven. There's always literature, poetry, imagination, but there are also facts in these historical books. The text begins by stating that it is a secret revelation from Jesus to Judas, made in the days leading up to the crucifixion. He even specifies, he says 3 days before the crucifixion, but then says it lasted a week, so I imagine it ended 3 days before the crucifixion. That's what makes sense, because it can't be after, with Jesus alive before the resurrection. Very curious, this book is one of the few that talks about Jesus smiling. Do you remember that I said I loved going to Galilee because there I picture Jesus smiling, close my eyes and see him preaching and smiling? In this book, in the Gospel of Judas, we see several references to Jesus smiling, and then Judas asks Jesus, what will happen to the people of that generation? The important thing is that Judas is not being seen as a bad person. No, Judas is not presented to us as someone with bad intentions. No, for now, let's see. And then Jesus answers, your bodies will die. That's what's going to happen, right? He asks, what about the people, about us? Your bodies will die, but your souls will remain alive and will be taken up. It's very Gnostic. It's a statement from Jesus, very much from the Gnostic point of view. Always believing that the spirit can change bodies, but the body cannot survive death in this Gnostic view. In the Gospel of Judas, Judas is seen as the only one who understands Jesus. The important thing is that, folks, when you have the Gospel of Mary, in the Gospel of Mary as well, Mary Magdalene is understood as the one who understands Jesus the most. So, there is a tendency in these Gospels that tell the story from the perspective of some apostle or disciple of Jesus, to value, to give importance to that disciple. It claims Judas is the only one who understands, which is quite an exaggeration, but it presents a moment in a dialogue, which we don't know if it's fictional, in which Jesus says to Judas, separate yourself from the other disciples, and I will reveal to you the mysteries of the kingdom. You can achieve this, but you will suffer a lot because someone else will take your place. You will suffer a lot. Jesus here in this book announces the death of Judas because of the betrayal. He will suffer whether he commits suicide or is murdered, because someone else will take his place. Another apostle, we know there will be an election in the upper room on the day of Pentecost. They will choose another Matthias to replace him, so that the 12 disciples can once again be completed with their God. So in the passage above, we saw that Jesus was even predicting the betrayal. The gospel justifies this betrayal, the gospel of Judas. You will surpass all of them, the apostles, because you, Judas, will sacrifice the human who clothes me. Nothing could be more Gnostic than this, guys. Do you understand what he's saying here? Look how interesting. For the Gnostics, our body is a garment, and this Jesus presented here thinks this way, similar to what we know. Who used to talk about garments, about the body as an envelope, you know? Allan Kardec? I know many Jornada followers are Spiritists. So, especially for those who follow Spiritism, for those who believe in it, know it, or respect it, I hope everyone respects it. But for those who are interested in Spiritism, this text is about Jesus saying to Judas, look, you will sacrifice the human that clothes me. In other words, you will kill my body, but you will preserve my soul. So isn't he telling Judas that it isn't the end of Jesus' life? So Jesus isn't even asking not to be betrayed. On the contrary, he treats it as something normal. He doesn't try to avoid the betrayal. Look how interesting that is. Rodrigo, I don't trust a Gnostic text. All right, but you're the one saying that. Do you believe this text is from a Christian who lived around the year 180? He believed in that. This is a Christian thought from a few decades, about a century after Jesus, from the century in which the Gospel of John was written. So it's important for us to understand. Many Christians thought this way. Look how interesting. What aspect of this might Jesus have brought that we don't know? So the betrayal is presented to us. It's a short gospel, and the betrayal is presented in the last part. In other words, it's the most important thing. No one is arguing about that. And once again, the historicity of the betrayal is attested by a Gnostic text. There's no way to dispute that this betrayal happened, or that the Gnostic text was inspired by the Gospels. He read the Gospels, of course he did, but this is 2nd century Christianity. This is what Christians believe in. The high priests were whispering since he was heading to the guest room to pray. They're talking about Jesus here. A few more teachers of the law who were there watched him carefully to arrest him during his prayer, since they were afraid to do it in front of the people because everyone considered him a prophet. It confirms what we talked about earlier. The priests didn't want to kill Jesus in front of the people. They wanted the Romans to kill Jesus. They handed him over to the Romans because otherwise there would be a revolt against them. Judas didn't want to kill because otherwise he would be accused. It all makes sense. Our historical investigation is making sense. We're coming to a conclusion. They didn't want to kill Jesus because they didn't want to get their hands dirty. They didn't want a popular uprising because Jesus was very popular. He was a great preacher. He drew crowds and everyone was worried. How are we going to kill Jesus? So that he would stop criticizing the corrupt priests who are corrupt, who sold themselves out to Rome, so we could silence this Jesus who causes us so much trouble. But we can't kill him in the middle of the street because he'll become a martyr, and that'll be a huge problem for us. But he became one anyway. He became much more than they could have imagined, the strength that Jesus gained even to our time. But this concern is with the Sadducee priests, the Pharisees, and with Judas, who doesn't want to be incriminated for this. So continuing here, some teachers of the law who were there were watching him carefully to arrest him during his prayer, since they were afraid to do it in front of the people because everyone considered him a prophet. They went to Judas and said to him, "What are you doing here? You are a disciple of Jesus." But Judas answered them as they wished. "I will hand Jesus over to you." That's why I'm here. And he received a little money, and that's why he handed him over to them. Look at how historically grounded this story is. It presents a Judas who is going to betray Jesus. At the moment when the priests don't know how to kill Jesus, he solves a problem for the priests. A lot of people here brought up the Christian understanding. Yes, it was the divine plan. That's how it was supposed to happen. The betrayal needed to happen, but also on the human level, the betrayal needed to happen. And it's interesting, folks, that shortly before the betrayal, the Gospel of Judas tells us about a transfiguration of Judas. Look at that, an apostle who goes through a transfiguration because of Jesus. See, Jesus is speaking. He's instructing Judas. See, everything has been told to you. Lift up your face and look at the cloud and the light within it and the stars that surround it. The star that leads it on the path is your star, Judas. So Judas is not just a mere criminal. He is experiencing a moment of transfiguration, and it is Jesus who guides him. Judas lifted his face and saw the shining cloud and entered it. Those who were standing on the ground heard a voice coming from the cloud that said, "Great generation." And then the text ends. The Gospel of Judas is intense, isn't it? And it doesn't give certainty about Judas's absolution, but in my view, it does absolve Judas.